Content warning. This video discusses authoritarianism, state violence, and coercive control at the governmental level. If the current moment is overwhelming you, that's a rational response to a real situation. Take care of yourself. Crisis lines are in the description. In video 1, I gave you the map, 8 mechanisms of coercive control from Evan Stark's research. In video 2, I showed you my personal story. One abuser, one home, one woman, who was a clinical expert in abuse patterns and still couldn't see it when it was happening to her. In video 3, I showed you the same pattern inside the healthcare system, a venture capital firm using the identical mechanisms on clinicians and patients. Today is the final level. Same cards, same architecture. But now the controlled population isn't one person or one workforce. It's an entire society. And I'm not going to name names. I don't have to. If you've watched the first 3 videos, you already have the framework. You'll see it. And here's what matters most. This is not new. This pattern has played out across centuries, across civilizations, across every continent. And every single time, the population eventually recognized it and said, no. That's not idealism, that's history. In my clinical practice, I noticed something. When authoritarian patterns began emerging in our public life, certain groups of people recognized them immediately. Domestic violence survivors, child abuse survivors. Their nervous systems had already learned to detect these patterns. They felt it before they could articulate it even. And then refugees from authoritarian countries. I had some, in my patient panel. They'd seen the system before. They told me, this is what it looked like where I came from. They were terrified because they know what comes next. These people are our early warning system, and for years they were dismissed as overreacting, hysterical, seeing things that weren't there. Now more people are achieving pattern recognition every day. If you're only now seeing it, understand this. The system is specifically designed to keep you too exhausted and confused to see the patterns. Exhaustion isn't a side effect, it's a strategy. And you're not too late, you're here now. That's what matters. Let me show you how the same 8 mechanisms operate when the abuser isn't a person or a corporation, but a system of governance. Authoritarian systems attack anything that connects people, like the free press, like independent institutions, like international alliances, community organizations. They need you separated from anyone who might validate your perception of reality. They want to control that. During the COVID lockdowns, we were physically isolated. It was necessary for public health, but it also conditioned us, and we started having screens turn into reality. We learned to live without our support networks. That conditioning didn't reverse itself when the lockdowns ended. Political division deepened the isolation further. Families split. I saw this happen with patients. Friends lost. People stopped talking to each other. Not because they wanted to, but because the information environment made every conversation a minefield. Isolation at this scale doesn't need locks. It just needs algorithms and enough outrage. When a government monitors what people say, where they go, who they associate with, and when citizens know they're being watched, self-censorship follows automatically. Same mechanism as in my marriage. Damien didn't have to read every text. He just had to make sure I knew he could. I became my own prison guard. It's like obeying in advance. At the societal level, this includes monitoring of political dissent, tracking of activists, surveillance of communities deemed threatening. The target population adjusts its behavior not because of direct orders, but because watching and how they watch you is known. The panopticon. You don't need guards in every cell if the prisoner believes they're always being observed. They'll be good. Throughout history, authoritarian governments have deployed enforcement agents into communities to create fear. Sometimes uniformed, sometimes not, sometimes masked. The point isn't efficient law enforcement. The point is fear and intimidation. When people are afraid to go to work, afraid to take their kids to school, afraid to seek medical care, they are controlled. When enforcement agents operate without clear identification, without warrants, without accountability, that's not policing. That's intimidation. And when citizens are killed by those agents, and the agents face no consequences, and the victims are publicly labeled as criminals or terrorists, that's a message to everyone else. This could be you. Received loud and clear. At the societal level, gaslighting sounds like, what you're seeing isn't happening. It's the rewriting of recent history, the denial of documented events. Very 1984. The insistence that video evidence doesn't show what it shows. The accusation that people reporting facts, they're the liars. It's calling peaceful people terrorists. It's calling these enforcers of fear and intimidation the heroes. It's the inversion of language itself, when words mean the opposite of what they used to mean. Same tactic Damien used, same tactic my employer used. Destabilize your trust in your own perceptions. Fuckery. If you can't trust what you see and hear, you can't organize, you can't resist, you can't even articulate what's wrong. Create dependency. Make survival contingent on compliance. Restrict access to resources. Concentrate wealth at the top while the population scrambles just to meet basic needs. Housing is unaffordable now. Medical care is a luxury. Wages have been stagnant while costs rise. Education debt that functions as a leash. Health insurance tied to employment so you can't leave a bad job. When people are one paycheck from catastrophe, they don't resist. They can't. They're surviving, and that's the point. This is Video 3's trap at national scale. The same closed loop, the same design. Exhaustion at the population level isn't about individual laziness. It's about a system that requires 2 or 3 jobs to afford rent. That offers no parental leave, no sick leave, no rest. That turns healthcare into a commodity and sleep into a privilege. Grind culture isn't a lifestyle, it's a control tactic. When you're exhausted, you can't think strategically, you can't recognize patterns, and you can't organize resistance. And then there's the exhaustion of the crisis cycle itself. One emergency after another. Outrage fatigue. The feeling of drowning in bad news until you just stop reading it or watching it. That's not apathy. That's a nervous system that's been overwhelmed by design. And this one is the clearest marker. Lundy Bancroft, one of the leading researchers on abusive behavior, identified this. Abusers give themselves permission to break rules while demanding strict compliance from their targets. Laws don't apply to them, or rules, only to you. At the governmental level, it looks like leaders who are above the law, while the population faces consequences for minor infractions. Allies who are pardoned while opponents are prosecuted. Institutions that enforce rules selectively based on loyalty. Rules for us, no rules for them. When you see that asymmetry, you're looking at coercive control. And here's the clinical note. This maps directly to what the researchers call a parasitic lifestyle, a hallmark of psychopathic personality patterns. Taking from others to sustain yourself while producing nothing of value. The parasite needs the host. but it will consume the host to survive. The boiling frog, again. Each violation normalizes the next one. The first time a boundary is crossed, there's outrage. The 10th time, there's fatigue. The 100th time, it's just Tuesday. This is why historians who study authoritarian regimes keep saying the same thing. The warning signs were visible early, but most people dismissed them because each individual step seemed small. It's never one big move. It's 1,000 small ones. Death of 1,000 cuts. Until you look up and don't recognize your country anymore. I studied immunology years ago. I found all of it and parasites fascinating. Stay with me, this matters. A parasite needs its host to survive. It feeds off the host's energy, the host's labor, the host's resources. But the parasite isn't wise. It takes and takes until the host is dying. And here's the critical insight. The most dangerous moment is when the host starts to resist, because the parasite will escalate to maintain control. In domestic violence, that's when the killing happens. Murder-suicide. The moment of leaving is the moment of greatest danger. And at the governmental level, that escalation looks like crackdown. Mass arrests, deployment of force against civilians. The more control slips, the more violent the response. But here's what the parasite doesn't understand. Coercive control is unnatural. It requires constant effort to maintain it. It's desperate, it's brittle, and it breaks. Every single authoritarian system in human history has eventually broken. Not because of one hero, not because of violence, but because enough people recognize the pattern and collectively refuse to comply. The parasite is not wise, but the host, I guess all of us, we can become wise. I want to be clear about something. I'm not telling you to fight violently. I am not. That's not my role, and it's not what I'm advocating. What I'm telling you is what the historical record shows over and over. Resistance starts with recognition, seeing the pattern, naming it, refusing to let gaslighting work. Then it becomes connection, breaking the isolation, reaching out to one person, the way I called that one friend. Then that person reaches out to another, networking. So networks form and communities hold. Then it becomes collective action. Not one person standing alone, that person gets crushed. But when cities coordinate, when states pass legislation, when institutions draw lines, when local governments say, not here, the rule of law applies to everyone, or it applies to no one. And this is what has happened in every successful resistance movement in history. From the American Revolution, to the fall of apartheid, to the Solidarity movement in Poland. The pattern is the same. People see it, people connect, people act collectively. And the system that seemed invincible turns out to be brittle. Revolutionary War. Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense in 1776, a pamphlet, words on a page. It didn't fire a single shot, but it names the pattern so clearly that people who had been living under it suddenly saw it and couldn't unsee it. That's the pattern. That's what pattern recognition does. Once you see it, the system loses its power to operate invisibly. If you want to see what this looks like in fiction, watch Andor. It's a show about coercive control at galactic scale, and about ordinary people finding their own ways to participate in resistance. Not all of them pick up weapons. Some of them just refuse to look away. In video 1, I told you, when you start to feel angry, that's not the problem. That's the signal. Your moral code recognizing injustice. Each personality type has that line. Every human being has it. It's not a flaw. It's the part of you that knows right from wrong and refuses to let it slide. The system wants your anger to turn into despair. Despair is passive. Despair gives up. But anger, directed anger, informed anger, that fire, anger that knows the pattern and refuses to participate in it, that's the most dangerous thing in the world to a coercive control system. And knowing history also makes you dangerous. Because it means you're awake and you're not going back to sleep. 4 videos, 1 framework, 3 scales. A home, a workplace, a society. Same 8 mechanisms every time. Isolation, surveillance, intimidation, gaslighting, economic control, exhaustion, permission asymmetry, and gradual escalation. I showed you this because once you see the pattern, you can't be controlled by it in the same way. That's not a slogan. That's how coercive control actually works. It depends on being invisible to the person inside it. The moment of recognition is the moment the system starts to crack. My marriage had the same architecture as my workplace, had the same architecture as what's happening around us right now. And in every case, the turning point was the same. Someone saw it, named it, connected with others, and said no. I called a friend. She showed up. Neighbors are helping each other. Cities are coordinating. States are passing legislation. People across the world are recognizing this pattern because it's the oldest pattern there is. Coercive control is not wise. It's parasitic. It's desperate, and it breaks. But the host, us, we can become wise. We can see the pattern, we can plant seeds, and we can refuse together to be consumed. That's what Seeds of Wisdom is about, not just the series, everything I'm building. Because the most powerful act of resistance is understanding, and you now have the map. Take care of each other, take care of yourselves, and remember, you are not alone.